welcome back to Just for the Modders. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and now welcome back to the part 2 of modding the SteelDive MM300. Just to recap on part 1, we were about to mod the SteelDive Marine Master 300 and the stem snapped, so we disassembled the movement partly just to remove that stem. So now part 2, we are going to go straight into it. We're gonna cut the new stem and complete the actual dial replacement. So it's been a bit of a learning journey, and this mod, believe me, took some hours, and you'll see why further on into part 2. So before we go into the video, please take this opportunity to hit the subscribe button. Remember to check the description for any useful links. So remember to hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all the latest videos, and remember to leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching and hope you enjoy it. The only way we're going to be able to do this is we need to measure the old stem. Although it's broken, I did manage to measure the old one, and that is exactly 16.7. So I basically held down the stem even though it's broken, and I managed to get a very accurate measurement of 16.8 or 16.7. 0.1 of a mil should make a difference. We now need to measure the new stem to that and use a permanent marker just to put a little line there. Next, grab it in some pliers, use a thick wire cutter or some snips, and just take off a little bit above the line that you've marked it, so you've got some leeway to file it down. You don't want to cut it too short just now. Once you snip it, just take a reading. So we're currently at 18 mil and we need to file off the rest in order to get 16.8. So I'm just going to speed it up now. There's me filing it down, and what have we got? 17.4, now 16.8. Yes, bang on, that's what we need. Now once we've cut that, we now need to secure the crown. Now usually you do this step after you've confirmed that the crown and stem actually fit. For that we need a case back so we can take it in and out, but because we haven't, we're gonna have to just wing it. Hopefully it works. Now secure the stem in some pliers, use a bit of high post cement or some Loctite, apply a small amount to the end. You don't need a lot. I mean, that will secure itself over time, obviously. So just dab a tiny amount onto the end of the stem. Make sure you've deburred it by using the file to go around the edges. Screw the crown on and we should be ready to go. Now once that's done, we need to put that movement within the case. Now with this, because it's a metal movement holder, once you place the movement in there, just make sure it's level before you sit it within the case. Make sure it's aligned with the hole for the crown, and now we can fit the crown and let's see what happens. Deep breath, hopefully it works. So moment of truth, let's put the crown in and just gently rotate it in, ease it in. You don't want to just shove it straight in, you could damage something. So let's check it out. What the hell was that? Right, now that was not a normal sound, but right now we don't know what it could be. So let's continue. Let's screw it down, check the date function. Everything seems to be functioning at this point. So what we need to do is just screw down the crown and continue with the build. Let's put the dials on and let's see what actually is happening with this movement right now. Now there's two things we can do here. We have the dial, the green one. Now what we can do is we can remove, if we wanted to use the green chapter ring, it's actually stuck to the dial, and all we need to do is to use a heat gun and we can pry that off. So let's show you how we do that. I'm actually gonna go with the black dial and the black chapter ring, but just to show you how easy it is to remove, let's have a quick look. Let's put you away over there. Here's my heat gun, just normal heat gun. It's got two settings. Don't make it too hot, you don't want to burn anything. And just stick it on your first level. Now that's gonna get hot. I have burnt myself with one of these before, so just be careful. Now that's hot now. And while that's hot, what we can do is we can sort of pry. You want something quite thin, so we can even use a Stanley blade. Now, point to mention, these dials, SteelDive dials, especially for this, that green, they're actually really good dials. As you can see, all applied indices. So the dial we're using, as mentioned, we're going to use a full black one. Now, I don't know whether or not to change the chapter ring. I didn't on the last mod, it looked okay. Let's go for it. Hopefully don't damage this dial, because then we're screwed. So a little note, when you are using the Stanley knife, make sure you stay around the edge of the dial once you have got it under the chapter ring, and that's to avoid any damage to the dial. Once you've peeled it off, if you get any adhesive onto the dial, then you can wipe that away with some alcohol spray and using some blue tack. When you're applying the chapter ring, there are 2 feet on the chapter ring. One is located at the 1 p.m. position and one is at the 6 p.m. Just align those and press it in, and it should be perfectly aligned. Once you apply that, because there's a bit of sticky already on the dial, just give it a quick heat and then that should stick back down. Just press down slightly. Now we can just let that cool down before we put it onto the actual movement. Now once you apply the dial, use the 2 dial feet and locate them onto the actual movement. Because it's a straight stop, the dial feet will match. If however you do break the dial feet, fear not. In my previous videos I've shown you how you can use adhesive dots onto the movement holder where you can stick the dial down. Gently press it in once the dial feet are within the location holes on the movement holder, and you're good to go. So now we need to apply the hands. Now the hands, no matter how many times you do them, I've done plenty of mods now, you know, they're still tricky. There's a slight knack to it, and you do need to adjust them, especially when you're using hand tools. So when using these hand pressing tools, you want to make sure that our hand, first of all, is aligned central to the 12 o'clock marker. Now once that's in, just press it gently but be firm with it. These movements aren't that fragile. You don't want to press super hard because you can damage the pinion or you can damage the hands. Now these Marine Master hands in particular and the ones from SteelDive are very thick. So once you pressed it down, you want to check for alignment and you want to make sure they're not tilted, they're not at any angles. So just observe that all the way around, make sure it's straight and make sure it's not tilted right to left. Once you've put that on, then you want to go ahead and clean the actual hands as well. You want to clean out every step of this just to remove any debris that you can see on the dial or the hands. Now another point here is when you want to set the other hand, it's good practice, and what I find anyway is you need to rotate the other hand until the 6 o'clock position. Now once you do that, and I find this is best practice really, when you apply the hour hand, the minute hand, sorry, at the 12 o'clock, you seem to get really good alignment. So what you also can do, you can adjust them slightly by just tapping the sides of the hands gently with using these hand pushers, just to aid that alignment slightly. Don't rush, you know, adjust them as much as you need to adjust them to make sure they're perfectly aligned and straight, because you don't want to keep going back in to the actual movement, back to the dial, taking them off, putting them back on. You're going to cause damage to your hands. Once you're happy the way they look, the alignment, go ahead, rotate through different positions. You want to make sure you check alignment at 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, back around to 12. You want to see where the date change happens. Usually on the NH35s, the date changes when the minute hand is roughly 5 to 12, but it doesn't really matter if the minute hand goes bang on 12 o'clock or even a few minutes after. As long as it adjusts around the midnight position, you should be good to go. Now it's time to put the seconds hand on. Now usually they are the trickiest, but what makes it trickier on this SteelDive and when using Marine Master 300 hands is that the hands are very thick, as mentioned. So usually you can see just the tip of the pinion sticking out over the hour and minute hand, which allows you to locate the pin on the seconds hand and insert it into that pinion. Now these hands are thick, as I mentioned a couple of times, so the pinion is not visible over the edge, so you've just got to really gauge it really well, use your eyesight. I do recommend a jeweler's loupe, just so you can see it, because you do need that magnification. However, thankfully my eyes are okay so far, so I can usually just look at it and insert it. So you just got to get it over the top, and make sure it's rested. Again, slight knack, you need to feel slightly. You know, I'm using the blue tack here. It's the best option I can see. Extend that blue tack just so you can really centralize that pin over the pinion. Once you think you've got it, just press gently to make sure it does sit. Don't press too hard, just get a good feel for it and just tap that hand down. Make sure it doesn't move around. If it does move around, then it isn't properly seated. And then finally give it one final clean before you do the testing. So let's give it a good wind. As you can see, I've been winding it for a while now. I'm not seeing anything. Let's click it out. Let's see. Let's try and set the time, see if anything happens. Let's turn the hands and let's see what we get. Okay, now that is not normal. You've seen how that second hand just spun and it's spinning. So there's something definitely not right. And this takes me back to just the start of the video when we had that funny sound when we inserted the crown and we had a really machine-like whir come through. So with that movement just whizzed. So I think that's got something to do with it. So we've had a massive mishap here, but just look at what the hands are doing. I've never seen a movement actually do this. Let's turn it more, let's see what else happens. Now I've been turning this for a good while now. Just look at that. I mean, it looks cool and amazing, but yeah, just look at that. Just on its own, it's just going off now and it's just spinning. I mean, I've never seen a movement do this. We know definitely the movement's not right there. Something is definitely the matter. Just look how crazy that's spinning. It's awesome to look at, honestly. But I'm looking at it all baffled, thinking what the hell is going on. Now what else? We can't remove the movement, we can't take the stem out. So is this, that's it, I'll be done with the mod here? Is it finished? You know, should we just pack it up? So I don't know what I can do with this, to be honest. It's totally just not working. Clearly something is the matter, but fear not, I'm going to investigate further. We're going to take off the dial, we're going to take off the hands, we're going to remove some of the movement from the top. We're going to see if there is a possible way, if we can get into the mechanism to remove the stem from the top down of the movement. If not, then we have to just stop the video there, pack it in, that's it. It's a bad job. Sometimes this happens, and I did say I would show this as well, so it's not always successful. But yeah, just look at the movement just totally going off on its own, and let's see what we can do. Okay, now let's just pause here for a minute. As you saw just previously, that the movement was absolutely knackered. It was just playing up. As I was winding the watch, as I was setting the time, you could see the second hand just whizzing around, the hands moving super fast. And you know what, it looked pretty cool, to be honest. I've never seen a watch movement do that. What I actually had to do, I had to remove this whole movement and I had to basically start again. So I went off camera, and you know, it was a bit of a nightmare. It took me at least 2 hours to resolve. So the first thing I had to do, I had to get the stem back out, which is next to impossible. You actually can't. So in an attempt to try, I have an NH35 movement, just a spare one. So what I ended up doing was I ended up removing this top plate here with the screws. I removed the date disc. I also removed, you know, most of the auxiliaries that you see around here. I removed this black thing there. I removed the cogs and everything. Now, in an attempt to pry that stem out from the top of the movement. Now that's actually impossible. There is no way to do it. And there's also a little protective little metal plate where the gears sit. where your stem goes into. So where you need to access it, it's just there, but the part of the chassis is there, so you actually can't get access to it. So I was about to give up, to be honest, but then what I did, I just put my cowboy hat on, and I went old school. I literally was able to, after removing the hands and the dial, I was able to pry the movement up enough. Now bear in mind, I've literally pried the movement out of the holder and I'm twisting it. The stem was bending, and it's due to the flexibility actually that I was able to do it. I managed to get my tweezers underneath, hit that release, and I got the stem free. That was about a good hour and a bit after me trying to get in from the top. I went on some forums, and there's actually no way to release the stem from the top of the movement. So this is the main problem you're going to be faced with if you're trying to mod one of these. But yeah, thankfully I managed to get that free. So what I did then, I reassembled the top part of the movement. Here I just put everything back in. I had to get one of these out just because a few gears, cogs fell out and I didn't know where they go. So that was easy. So then what I did was I went back to this movement. I went to what we did to remove the old stem. So I just took apart the rotor here. I took apart the parts that we took off previously, and I just reassembled it basically. Reinserted the stem and crown before I went to the movement, and it worked fine. So I think what I gathered, it is actually past my understanding. I don't know enough about the movements and the mechanisms, but what I think actually happened was when I inserted the crown, it didn't go in right, I don't think, and it was messing with the smaller gears that are within the actual movement. So right underneath this date disc, you can see, there's a few gears there, and they are responsible for the hacking and the hand winding, different steps that you have within when you operate the crown. Sorry. So yeah, I think it was something that needed adjustment there. So I think what helped was me taking it off from the face, stripping the movement down slightly, and just messing with the little cogs, and then obviously reassembling the backside of the movement. So I'll put it back in, hope for the best, put the crown in, and this time paid a bit more attention to it, just fed it through and twisted as I did, and went in perfectly fine. The watch movement is ticking, as you can see. I've got it here. There you go, it's hand winding. Now it's about to change also. Let's hack it. There we go. Let's change the time. Spot on. And date change. Everything works perfect. So yeah, because I was about to give up, bonus, I never gave up. I managed to get it done, and it works now. Now just before I close this up, what do I think about this SteelDive? I'd say stay away from modding it if possible. Only risk it if you've got a few watches lying around and you don't mind going through all this hassle. For the most part, it's a 50-50 chance that you will break the stem. This is my third one that I've opened. I snapped the first one, the second one was okay, and I've snapped this one, so it's actually a little over 50-50, but there is a high risk that you will snap. If you do, not to worry, the measurement is 16.7 millimeters. That's how long the stem needs to be, 16.7 to 16.8. I think you're okay with that. And then just pay attention when the crown goes in, and you should be okay, to be honest. Yes, these watches are kind of cheap, so you can replace it with whatever dial you wanted to. I went with another SteelDive dial, and now we can put it back together. So we've got to make sure the seal is sitting correctly, that's okay. And all we're going to do is we're going to need to stick this click spring mechanism back on. Just make sure it's facing the right way. So these prongs should be sitting up. Back on. Just look at the bottom two prongs and make sure they are seated correctly. I will say it's quite easy to open this because we have that crystal and the bezel mechanism all into one. Just give this one last bit of inspection to make sure there's no fingerprints, there's no little pieces, there's no bits of dirt and dust that are going to be underneath it. And all you want to do is we want to place this back on top. Now you've got to gently do this. okay, because the threads on this aren't as buttery smooth, so you've got to actually just be a bit careful screwing it on. Now we need to screw this anti-clockwise, but it's got to catch. Use your fingers if you have to, and that will help bring it down. And there we go. And yeah, that does sound awful. Well, it sounds better now. But yeah, not much of a fan of this bezel, I have to say. Just tighten it down a bit more. Let's give this a clean. And there we go, the end product. I think it's a good little mod. It looks nice. You got this Kermit, obviously, color combination. What I will say about SteelDive, you know, functionally this mechanism isn't the best. It's quite poor, but you know, the dial that they use is of a really high quality, and also the hands that they use, again, are really high quality hands. They're very thick. They've got brushing down the center, chamfered polished edges. So the quality of the parts is actually really good. It's just a shame about the mechanism. That's the old dial. I've just put the black chapter ring around it. So I've got another dial here that I can mess about with. It's up to you guys to weigh it up, pros or cons, if you want to attempt this. I'd say if you want to go to the next step of modding, definitely attempt this. You know, be ready for challenges, and then obviously take those challenges on. Removing a broken stem is not as hard as you'd think. It is quite easy. Just make sure on the reassembly of it, there is a knack that you need. It isn't as easy as it looks. It took me, I've spent hours on some of these, just figuring it out, you know, just taking a break, coming back to revisit it. But that's that. So thank you everybody for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little tutorial. Hope you learned something like I have. And for the next video, I will be modding my Proxima MM300, and we're going to see the difference in mechanism. So I'll see you on the next video.